Hey, this is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and I need to deviate from my usual sort of war cry strategy content for a second because there's some really important stuff happening in the community right now. And I think I'd be remiss not to talk about it, not to report on it, because honestly, I just think these issues are important enough that everyone should be talking about them. So, if you hadn't heard, um, Games Workshop posted a pretty well written little piece here about how Warhammer 40K is a satire, if you hadn't already heard. Um, and they have later in the piece a lot of things alluding to um, the thing that happened in Spain, and I've heard that there were similar things in the US as well, um, where someone came to an event with Nazi gear on and I guess in Spain, the legality was kind of on their side as far as whether they were allowed to be kicked out. Although, still the people who refused to play them got caught a loss, and yeah, it was just awful. And the fact that there are people in that kind of attire at any kind of event is just awful. So Um, let's pretend for a moment that waiting 2 whole weeks is acceptable because it's not, but this is a really well put together post. I really love the well, one, the way it's written, but also just the fact that they actually came out and said it. You see so often um, people will say, various stuff about how like the Imperium does what it has to, things like that in lore places, and finally, you can say from the company itself very recently that no, this is just an awful place with terrible people and no goodies, as they like to say, not referring to snacks. And to be fair, it is sort of two posts, not just one. Last year they had the Every Warhammer is for Everyone post that somehow became controversial. Um, Everything that happened there with Arch Warhammer probably, this is because something like that should never be controversial. But the fact is that our community is already dealing with such an intense toxicity problem, such an intense sort of a rot within the community that um, it be something that simple did become controversial. And I'm ready for this to be controversial as well. Um, there's sort of a few tweets going around about sort of uh, Nazis in your bar, and this has been an open secret among like the parlor community for quite a while, where uh, you do one questionable, uh, maybe Nazi, maybe white supremacist tattoo, and then all of a sudden you're doing a bunch of them, and they're not questionable, like maybe construed this way. They like very much are. And all the, regular bikers that you were giving tattoos to before have all disappeared. Um, Once you sort of accept fascist iconography, fascist sort of culture into your own culture, it's very hard to get rid of it. And I think that that's what we're seeing, and why these posts are being needed. So it's good to see GW actually, come out and say it. The problem is, and the reason I wanted to make this video is that I'm very frustrated with the fact that they would, go out and do this, and this is written again really well, by the way, but it's written as if, we're meant to almost be giving them a pat on the back for this. And I just think that GW is a little more complicit than I think they like to pretend here. So let's take a step back and talk, right? Because this is satire. They do a really nice job here. They define satire for you. Satire is the use of humor, irony, or exaggeration, displaying people's vices or a system's flaws for scorn, derision, and ridicule. Um, the problem is Poe's law. Poe's law is just that without a clear indicator of the author's intent, every parody of extreme views can be mistaken by some readers for a sincere expression of the views being parodied. The simplest version of Poe's law is satire doesn't exist. Um, if you say you're doing satire, and you don't actually sort of create quote unquote the winky face, then you're not doing satire. Um, and Warhammer is just one giant pose law problem. This is why we have the problem of fascists in our hobby. Um, all of the marketing is done from the Imperium's perspective. Little spell check issue there, but um, it's still really important to think about. And then there's, a lot of Space Marines are sort of shown as heroes. We need to actually see the sort of admission of satire there, or else people won't see it. And this has just been established over and over and over in multiple different communities that you can't really have pure satire without ever spelling it out, or else it will be misinterpreted. That's just part of how the world works. Um, this little book is really well put together, but it never once breaks character. It never once stops having the incredibly intense point of view writing of for more than 100 centuries, the emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of earth. That tone is the entire way through the book. Um, which, if you come at it and you're not the type of person to mistake the satire um, for sort of a sincerity, um, is really gripping and really interesting. But that's just never going to be the universal way that something works. There's, I think, a conversation here to talk about whether or not AOS is any better. I think it's worth tabling that until Dawnbringer Crusades, this new force that they're coming out with, actually comes out to get a better sense of how they're doing this sort of potentially dicey thing about their crusades. But um, looking forward to breaking that down on its own, let's just say. But to get past the Poe's Law thing, so now let's get into this other section of it before I actually talk about what I think GW is culpable of. And this is just to head off people because I know every type of video like this, you get people, one, you get sort of actually fascist people who are angry with you for not being like them, but you also get people who just want you to get politics out of your game. There's nothing I can really say that this cartoon doesn't say better. It's shocking to me that we even have to have this conversation, so I'll just say uh, at the simplest level, right? In any situation, the status quo is political. Everything is political. And what makes it dangerous is that the status quo isn't just political, but it's invisibly political. It is the default, right? By nature of being the status quo. So a challenge to it is going to seem quote unquote political, get politics out of my game. It's going to seem controversial. Enforcement of it is always going to be seen as default and normal because you don't see the politics in the status quo if you're not sort of specifically looking for them. It's very easy to gloss over them. Um, so any kind of enforcement of it just seems normal. So because of that, um, certain sort of extreme political statements, they slowly become acceptable and normal. Uh, things like people saying the Imperium does what it has to, or the Eldar birthed Slaanesh because they were degenerates. Now, degenerate then becoming a dog whistle for, you know, all of the scary liberal things that certain people don't like. Um, and, something that should be pretty clear, right? This is satire, um, is pretty much always going to get lost when sort of the general milieu is a certain way, and people just kind of exist in it. And again, when the satire gets lost even just a little bit, um, all of these actually really monstrous things to say, right? When you hear people yelling like "death to Xenos" at a tournament, all of that kind of comes out, and that is political. So challenging it, you know, if you're going to hear someone say "get politics out of the game" or "I don't want to hear about this," in response to a challenge to that kind of thing, uh, yeah, they're just missing the point, or they are actively wishing they could just go back to living with the racist stuff just kind of out there and not challenged. So the problem here also, and this is where I want to take GW to task, is they're looking to have their cake and eat it too, right? So they've put out forces very recently, just this year, that are absolutely dog whistling to, and by dog whistle, I mean um, sort of a signal that is meant to be interpreted by one group as an endorsement or meant to mean something as an endorsement or, um, as a nod to one group, hopefully without other groups noticing. And there's two really important and really dismaying, honestly, examples of it uh, happening lately in GW, and things that to me make the statement they made not meaningless because it's always meaningful to come out against hate, but um, a little bit two-faced. So the Black Templars, right now, um, if you're coming at the Black Templars with a healthy sense of irony, if you understand what's going on with them, if you're not endorsing them, um, that's fine. I have no issue with certain people painting them up, but the fact is, they come with a Maltese cross. If you, well, they come gray. If you paint that Maltese cross black, it looks like an iron cross. Um, and even if it didn't, the Maltese cross is a Crusades symbol, and Crusade stuff is often used as a white supremacist sort of um, introductory thing into neo-Nazi stuff. So it's Crusade symbols, you know, all of that sort of old medieval, but specifically like fighting for Christianity stuff is used as sort of totems to display kind of a white supremacist attitude without necessarily using things that are um, unacceptable in public. So they just put this force out there. They refreshed them. They essentially told, and the Black Templars have been kind of known by the community to be sort of the questionable force for a while. They just straight out put it out there. They endorsed this kind of stuff for their players. And yes, in a world where every faction is evil, you could say, well, you know, is putting corn out there endorsing bloodthirsty murder everywhere. Um, the issue is that the Black Templars are using actual symbols that actual hate groups are also using, um, which is very different than Corn, who is much more clearly fantasy. Um, even though you could maybe argue that there's an issue with Corn as well. I don't think I would go that far, but I do think it's a real problem here with the Black Templars. And then if you look at the other kind of questionable faction that they just refreshed lately is the Death Corps of Krieg. Now, they weren't supposed to be Nazis from the beginning. They were supposed to be based on actually French World War I fighters, I think. Um, they have been kind of, again, co-opted by a lot of these groups as sort of the historical army to use to play out your kind of Nazi fantasy. You see a lot of people painting them uh, like the German army, like the Wehrmacht. Um, you can go other places if you want to hear about, whether it's acceptable to just say, "Oh no, I'm just into their military," as a as a way of endorsing Nazism without endorsing Nazism. It's awful. Um, the fact is for GW, right? Sometimes your symbols get away from you. Um, the fact that you've released these two armies in the past year is emboldening the most hateful, the most fascist, the most Nazi parts of your fandom. It's emboldening them to come out and be proud about themselves because they think you're endorsing them. Okay? You can't just say a post saying all of this is satirical and all of these people are bad, and then come out with these armies um, mirroring real world hate groups and say that you're innocent in this. Um, and it's hard. They are in a difficult position, I think, uh, because power fantasies in general, you could say every franchise is essentially a power fantasy, right? People want to feel strong, heroic, uh, powerful, Um, and Games Workshop, they're in the business of giving people what they want. The problem is that these power fantasies are just hopelessly muddled and confused in Warhammer, to the point where, again, I think that GW has to take a stronger hand uh, to sort of prove that they're not actually endorsing this. And one post on their Warhammer community site doesn't do it, right? Because when GW marketing and story materials paint Space Marines as heroes, it creates this, again, political status quo where these evil fascist monsters are the heroes, which enables these hate groups. So I just wanted to post this because I love the Games Workshop actually came out and fucking said it. This thing that was true in the 80s that they said all over the place in the 80s that they haven't said since. It's been, what is this, 3 decades essentially since they've explicitly gone out there and said that there are no heroes in their universe. Um, I just wish that it would be something that they universally did everywhere because, again, the hate groups that sort of shocked people the last few weeks, um, they're here for a reason, and they're here because GW has courted them. I just want to point people also to a really nice perspective that the Honest Wargamer gave. He kind of stepped through the whole thing, read it along with his Twitch chat, and I think they had a really good conversation. So I just wanted to post that out there for people who haven't seen this yet. Um, I hope to be going back to just straight Warcry strategy very soon. And until then, if you're still here, may all your rolls be crits. Um, please leave a comment. These types of videos tend to get the ire from sort of all of the wrong types. So, you know, if you're the type of person who needs to be explained why Nazi propaganda is bad, get out of here. But, if you're here acting in good faith and you think I'm being too hard on GW, let me know in the comments. I'm interested in hearing what people have to say there. Um, Also, if you also are sort of made uncomfortable sometimes by the way GW is handling their 40K content, let me know that too. Uh, Bye.